Hello and welcome to week 34's gameplay episode. A high caliber of gameplay guests on this podcast, and that's not just because Josh isn't on this week. We have, first of all, foot legend AirJapes. Hello.
Hello. I didn't expect Josh to be catching strays like 2 seconds into the podcast, but great start and happy to be back.
Yeah, good to be back. And we have 𝘭𝑪 as well, top NA player, of course. How are we doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you. And actually, I hear you've done a few SBCs, just to dive straight into it, that might be of interest. Let's start, first of all, I think you said before the podcast that you've been using 𝘬𝑚𝑖 Kelly. She's a bit higher value maybe than a fair few of the SBCs we've had, but I'm hearing good things. So yeah, would you agree?
Yeah, she's been fantastic for me. At the time of us recording, I've only played 5 weekend league games so far, but she has like 4 goals and 7 assists, and most of the games didn't even go past halftime. So she's just been so good all around. I'm playing her right center forward in your 3-4-2-1. So she's been amazing for me there.
Yeah, one of her 3 play styles is whipped plus. Is it still worth completing her if you're not really someone who crosses, do you think?
Yeah, I'd definitely say so. I haven't used it too much. I'll use it sometimes on a corner. I'll kind of play it short, then lay it off, and then she can cross it in. The 5-star weak foot definitely helps with that. But even without it, I think, with the first touch plus, you can ping passes into her and then use the quick step plus to accelerate. And with how short and shifty she is, amazing dribbling. I'm using a 𝘗𝗽𝗓. I don't feel like you have to touch the dribbling, but it makes her basically max pace shooting, passing, and dribbling with incredible physicals too. Her aggression's bad, but otherwise her physicals are so good, and it really helps to have 92 stamina with relentless, so you don't have to sub her off.
Yeah, and actually I was going to say, I've criticized a few times the lack of realism in terms of some of the playstyle pluses given. Hers are quite accurate, but it's still, in my opinion, criminal that she does not have 5-star skills. Anyone who's seen her play, and also particularly if you've seen a few compilations circulating, she's probably one of the most skillful women's players you'll see, and she does some skills that I've honestly never seen before, so that is a bit of a shame. Hopefully she gets 5-star skills on some version at some point. Who is the other player you've been using, Hugh, did you say?
I've been using the SBC Wan-Bissaka.
What position actually? Because I guess he could be a centre back or a right back.
Yeah, it's nice that he has center back as one of his actual positions, so he doesn't get the in-game penalty from that. So I'm starting him at right center back in your 3-4-2-1, and I start in a 3 at the back as well. It's actually funny, in order to get everyone in positions, I have Havertz, who plays left mid in that tactic. He starts as a striker, so he's kind of my left back starting at striker. And then we have the right-sided defender starting at center back. But it works well. He's been really good, and I appreciate the flexibility. So if someone's not playing 4-3-2-1 and I want to switch to the 4-3-3-5, false 9, he can move to right back and do a great job there because I have my right back on stay back and inverted. So him not being great going forward isn't an issue.
Yeah, I assume he isn't great going forward. Looking at his dribbling stats.
Yeah, not great. His passing's decent enough though, so that's pretty nice. But I'm playing him with an anchor, so he's controlled lengthy with 96 strength and 99 jumping, and he just feels fantastic. I feel like the pace is good enough with an anchor because he has jockey plus. He shifts so quickly. And also 88 agility and 80 balance just feels like whether he's on or off the ball that he's nimble enough that he doesn't really need the extra acceleration from a shadow.
Yeah. Have you had any, apart from that, sort of playstyle revelations over the last week?
Beyond feeling like 𝘬𝘬𝘦 Sané might be the player that could cure my disdain for Rapid Plus, and knowing better as soon as I completed the SBC, no.
Nice. What about you, Hugh, actually? Any playstyle revelations recently?
I'll just continue to say that I love Press Proven Plus. It's even the base version is just so good. But I've been using, I guess I should say for context, I was wanting to get the Team of the Season Stanway in. Unfortunately, at the moment, I'm not able to buy her because she's extinct with a price range of 290k, which is insane.
Let me just do a quick aside, because we didn't actually mention this on the content pod. It is pretty bad that both her and, is it 𝘭𝑪, the Polish striker, have been extinct all weekend. People might be really enthusiastic. They saved up the coins to buy them, and then they're just not available for any price, really. I mean, obviously, you can try and snipe them, but a lot of people aren't able to do that. And I think it's a real downer, for people going into Team of the Season when that isn't possible. So yeah, I did want to point that out. But anyway, Hugh, continue, sorry.
So yeah, I was wanting to use Stanway, but since I couldn't, I was, kind of looking around the club and thinking, who could I try out? And I do have the fantasy Stanway, so I could do that, but I was thinking it'd be fun to try someone a bit different. So I found from the depths of my club, when I was doing the friendly cup with the max rating, that pundit pick Adam Wharton, the Crystal Palace midfielder.
Oh, yes.
I've actually been using him in my weekend league team, and he's so good. He has a 5-star weak foot with medium high work rates, long ball plus, and press proven plus. A few other play styles that are solid, but just like really good all around stats, like just a reliable, solid midfielder. So he's been really good for me, and he's left footed. So I feel like that's kind of, fun, a little bit different. So yeah, I've been enjoying him. He actually came into the team for that SBC Odegaard, who's definitely a better player in general, but as a like midfield 2 in the 3-4-2-1, I feel like I need someone a bit better defensively.
Yeah, and I should ask, how have you found the 3-4-2-1 overall? It's quite aggressive, but it certainly felt effective for me.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Definitely does well against 4-3-2-1. I think for a while, my team was so specifically tailored to 3-4-2-1 that if I faced someone not playing 4-3-2-1, like it didn't do that well, and I didn't have many options to change. But now with like Wan-Bissaka and stuff, that I can be a little bit more flexible. So if they switch to a 4-4-2, which I feel like is a pretty good counter, then I can go to the false 9, which is good counter for that.
Yeah, it's been getting some good reviews, which has been nice to see. If people want to find out more about it, then last week's supporter gameplay episode would be where there's some extended chat about it. In terms of personnel, Hugh, are there any things people should note that you found playing the tactic? I think that's a good point about the versatility of having someone who can play right back, allow you to play fullback if you'd like to. But was there anything else you spotted in terms of the personnel?
Yeah, I'd say the wide fullback or the wide center backs definitely need to be quick and not just like high sprint speed, but like fairly agile, because a lot of times you'll be like one-on-one against like a winger type or a more shifty dribbler. So they need to be able to stay in front of them, not just like catching up to them, but actually like, jockeying in front of them is really helpful. But then otherwise, I'd say having a solid defensive pivot in front of them really helps to, cut out counters. Things like intercept plus, definitely valuable to have. I've been running, I'd say, not super defensive players as my wide midfielders. Right now it's the SBC Havertz and the SBC Alvarez, who I put through the evolution. So Havertz obviously has good defending, but I'm using an engine on him. So it's like good enough defending. Alvarez, not quite as good defensively, but in game, he's actually been really solid for me. I don't know if it's 98 aggression, 77 defensive awareness. Like he just like makes a decent amount of tackles. So I've been happy with them. Good enough defenders, like not totally incompetent, but they don't need to be like actual fullbacks.
That's a good point. To help with exactly what you were talking about earlier in terms of those wide centre backs, I did, and I mentioned this last week, end up evolving the 𝘭𝘰𝗰𝘀 wildcards through the TOTS Plus Protector. And I have to say, the combination of Jockey Plus and Quickstep Plus is ridiculously good. And, he doesn't have the best defensive awareness at 85 base. Obviously, that goes up a bit with the shadow to 89, but he does feel like he can jockey really well, even though his defensive awareness isn't super high. One of the issues with having Quickstep on a centre-back is when you're trying to slow down to hold up an attacking player, they can kind of go past them and not be mobile enough to kind of jockey in front of them. But with the plus, he really is. So I would, maybe recommend that if you are a bit of a pacey centre-back enthusiast. He is really, really quick, obviously, and has good other play styles, including obviously the pinged pass plus, which is good for playing out, intercept, anticipate, long ball, tiki-taka and aerial, and he's really tall as well. So yeah, really like him. Let's move on to a question. We'll come to you, James, first of all on this one. And I don't know whether this is something you can identify with, but it'd be interesting to know what you thought about it. So Carl Eric is saying, any tips on how to play more direct and take advantage of countering opportunities? I consider myself a patient player, but I sometimes feel like I'm too slow and scared to play that killer pass and play it quickly, I assume. Do you just go if there's space, basically? You're just like, yeah, off I go.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to, like, maybe once upon a time, but I think the thing is, like, people get scared to play the killer pass if they've never tried to play the killer pass. So like, oftentimes in your brain, you go, ooh, I don't know if that pass is going to work. I'm not going to play it. Right. And the way to get around that is you just start playing insane passes sometimes that you're like, let's just see what happens. Like, can this player pull this off? And if you go in with like a curious mindset of like, can this player pull this off or not? It's a totally different situation, as then you're expanding your horizon as far as like what passes you think you're capable of making, or what passes your players are capable of making. And so I would encourage you, go into some games and try to hit the hero passes and just see what comes off and what doesn't come off, and try them like a variety of ways. But if the space seems like, and the way you can start to like try to do this as well is you can, like, this is a good opportunity to use L1 to tell your player to make runs. If you have like you're working it out of the back and you have your right back play like an L1A, or was it LBX, whatever, or is it whatever combo of like the give and go passes with your outside fullback, pass it up to your outside attacking mid, or however you're playing, it can probably right forward if you're playing 4-3-2-1. Pass it back to a CM, maybe to your other CM, and then just try to hit the hero ball over the top. Just try to time it and get used to it. And because like part of the issue is people don't understand the timing of players making their runs and how long it takes for those animations to actually happen for those long passes. And so you have to, your brain's not going to incorporate that into your game unless you actually try to do it. So like, because it sounds like what you're doing is just like tunnel visioning on short passes, which happens when you're scared to play long passes. And you're scared to play long passes because you don't know if they're going to work or not. So try the hero pass, see if it works. If it doesn't work, you defend. That's the name of the game. But like, it's how you create chances.
Yeah, I think good points. And I'd be interested to hear from you, Hugh, about this, because I think you used to be a very possession-heavy player, from what I remember.
Sometimes, yeah. I think I'm more just patient until the right opportunity's there. But in general, with the more aggressive passes, I think better to have too much power than not enough. If you underhit it, it probably gets intercepted and now you're getting countered. Whereas if you overhit it, maybe it goes to the keeper, maybe it goes out of play, but like it's not an active counter situation. If you feel like you can't get the power quite down, I'd say player locks are definitely good, because you don't have to worry about the power. You just select the player and choose the pass type, and it kind of just does it for you. Obviously, you need like decent passing players to get those passes, but those can be really useful if you feel like you're able to do player locks. But one other tip would be to look at the formation your opponent's playing and how they're using it. So say they play a 4-3-2-1 and they have the right back on get forward and overlap or something like that, then you know when you win the ball back that his right back area is going to be open. So if you trigger a run with the left bumper or L1 down that wing, then you can play that ball into space and you know it's going to be open. So I think sometimes if people try to like dribble around and search and, try to find the pass, either it's too slow and the pass is gone by the time they play it, or they're looking around too much and then they get tackled. So if you know where the gaps are going to be, then you can just kind of pass it as soon as you get the ball without worrying about, who's where.
Nice. Yeah, good advice. I feel like I am definitely too impatient, so don't have much particularly to say on this myself. And on that, we'll take a break actually and be back with more tips just after this. Hello, welcome back after the break. So you might remember a few weeks back, we had a long discussion about basically a listener who had got stuck, I guess, in terms of gameplay, really struggled this cycle, gave a lot of advice connected to the question he asked. His name was Cordless Hawk, and he got in touch maybe a week or two ago with this message, which was great to see. He said, "Hi, Ben and the team. First, I want to really thank you for taking so much time and for providing incredible detail on my question regarding my current experience on FC24. The episodes, particularly the one with Alex B, shout out to him, was very helpful, and I've saved it to listen to once a week. I thought I'd give it a few weeks to implement the advice before sending more detail, and I have to say it's been a game changer. I've since qualified for champs 3 weeks in a row and achieved 6, 11 and 9 wins. That's from not qualifying. So he's really happy about that. He says, I just wanted to give some feedback on what's worked. After having a hard look at my gameplay, I knew deep down what my problem was, which is pressure. I've never been good under pressure and really struggle at the end of each cycle when cards hit crazy levels, and that's when pressure tactics are most effective because players have 99 stamina, etc. This is what I found worked. Less sprinting. I sprint into pressure all the time and purposely tried to not press the sprint button at all. Bringing the receiving player towards the ball rather than away has also been really important, and I've given less possession away due to that. So that was the tip to, when you receive the ball, go back to where it came from, because that is normally a channel that's free. Calling players short, which I never used. Again, it made a difference. So yeah, that's tapping R1 or RB. Writing tips and things down to read during breaks in play is also very good. Finally, my golden rule of each game is to try under no circumstances to give the ball away. It's obviously not practical, but just knowing that rule helps me be more conscious of my play. Genuinely, all I can say is thanks. I was really ready to throw in the towel. I always put the ownership on me and my ability, not the game, but I just needed some form of plan to follow. So it's been amazing. Thank you so much. Then he goes on to ask a question, which actually I think, Japes, you were talking about before the podcast, how handling pressure is harder during Team of the Season. And he's basically saying, how should I deal with pressure? Because it's becoming an increasing struggle. So yeah, first of all, really great that those bits of advice really helped him. Fantastic to see, and great to get the feedback back that it did help as well. I was just thinking, actually, Hugh, let's come to you first, because I know people were asking about this in the Spoti Discord, and we were both giving out some advice on this, and it seemed to help. So maybe run us through what that advice is about playing out of pressure.
Yeah, sure thing. And I would definitely agree. It is harder during Team of the Season. I've noticed it myself. So don't feel like it's necessarily just that you're doing something wrong. It's definitely harder to beat the press now that, players are so boosted with their high stats and all these different things. So definitely a normal feeling to have. But, what was said in the original part of the feedback, I think is definitely true. Playing it short and safe back to where it came from. So, if you need to go back to the goalkeeper, you can do that. The auto press will never press the goalkeeper on its own. A player would have to do that individually. So you can always go back to the goalkeeper and then kick it long if no one's open. But usually I find that if I go back to the keeper, that it leaves someone else open because they'll pull someone to press the keeper. Then you can kind of play it to that player and you're good to go. But overall, just being patient. Don't try to play fast and straight through the press. I think a lot of people think that maybe you can beat the press by playing the pass before it gets, the press closes in, but the press will already be there by the time they receive the ball. So even if you do complete it, usually the player who's receiving it is under a lot of pressure. So I'd say unless the player is wide open, don't force a forward pass. Obviously, if they left a fullback spot open and your winger is in tons of space, then yeah, you can play that pass. But a lot of times people win it and just try to spam a pinged pass out to the wing as fast as possible, and it just gets cut out, or they get tackled as soon as they win it. So it's just, playing too high risk, and by speeding up, you're playing into your hands. That's what they want you to do, is by pressing, you're trying to speed them up, make mistakes, things like that. So if you try to play at that same pace, it's probably going to go worse for you, just because the way that AI kind of favors that pressure and tackling rather than a player receiving a pass. So just being calm, taking your time. The auto press, quote unquote, only lasts for, I think, 5 to 7 seconds, unless they're doing like constant pressure or something. So if you can kind of bide your time, play it back to the keeper, play it to another defender, something like that, then just wait for things to calm down, players get in position, and then you can kind of play a more normal style rather than scrambling.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. One thing I think is important to remember when trying to play out of the press in FC is that the way the press is coded and the way that defensive transition is coded means that it's not just that the players are trying to get close to the ball to put pressure on, but they're also trying to get sort of roughly back into their defensive shape, or at least drop back into their defensive positions. And what that means is almost always when you receive the ball, you start to get pressed, you'll notice that players behind the ball are free to pass to. And the mistake people often make is they think, oh, if I can just get it past these 3 or 4 players around the ball, then I'll have an easy counter opportunity. But actually, that's kind of what your opponent wants in a way. They want you to make that risky pass. Whereas if you look behind you generally, and that might end up being the keeper, you will have an open pass, and probably multiple open passes in quite a lot of situations. So I would say that is an important thing to consider. Just passing it backwards is almost always, just with that first pass, the thing that you should do. And it can happen really quickly that you play a pass back and then you play a first time pass to move it on, and you haven't really lost any time countering anyway. I would also say we're seeing these players with intercept plus, even regular intercept on a lot more players. Good interceptions, great stamina. And what that means is that the attacking players or the midfield players or whoever's pressing you has better attributes for doing the pressing, But don't forget that you should have better attributes for playing out of that press. So if you have a centre back with the ping to pass plus, which that 𝘬𝘐𝑚𝑖q I was talking about has, you're going to find it a lot easier to play out of the press for sure. And I would really recommend looking for that on defenders you're using because it helps a lot. And long pass as well is obviously important too. 𝗪𝗠𝑝es, you obviously have said in the past that you're fairly good at playing out of a press. So it's notable that you're saying, it is tougher at this point in the cycle. Are there any things that you found that have helped? Anything that you tend to do that isn't working maybe, or any insight at all is very welcome.
I think that if you are, one thing to be conscious of, or that I have to be conscious of, is not letting my fullbacks get too far forward. Fullbacks in this game are sort of like they're just like an outlet always, almost, even if you're on like the same side. Obviously, this switch for one fullback to the other, another outlet, going from a center back to a fullback, or even from like your CM to the other fullback, like it's just sort of an outlet. But if they get pushed too far forward, you can get yourself into a little bit of trouble there. So I think that's one thing. And then, the other thing is I'm getting more and more players that have like a press proven inclusion in the midfield. So like Sawa, I still use, and she's kind of like press proof for the most part. It's not always true. Sometimes players come in with like Bruiser and like Jockey Plus and can kind of deal with her. But I would say for the most part, like I'm having to adjust. And like Vieira is the perfect example. I've used, I packed Vieira out of an icon pact very early on. I've been using him for a very, very long time. He does have base press proven, which allows me to get away with a lot with him. But his agility and balance to go along with like some of his dribbling and ball control, even with that base press proven, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, maybe I need someone a little bit more nimble to deal with just like the rapid. I mean, every player has close to max pace at this time. They're all getting crazy agility and balance, which means they can also shift a lot faster to go with you. So if you don't have players that can still stay ahead of that like shiftiness curve in a lot of positions, and also have like a willingness to play like pressure relief passes, like you're just going to have a hard time. And I think it's just like players. I'm playing against midfields now with folks that all have, like 90 plus interceptions, maybe an intercept plus play style here or there. And it's just a lot harder to play through because they're all in like relatively good positions. And when the player's decent and they switch, they can also run at you at, 99 pace or whatever. So it's just kind of like that point in the cycle where it's just going to get a lot harder, but you have to, make sure you don't commit too many bodies forward. And I find that I play, on slow buildup, and that's just because it helps having players like check to me. And if I'm being lazy and not using the manually triggered R1 runs, I also have a harder time. Like R1 is great for playing out of pressure because you tap it like 3 times and all of a sudden you have 3 players running towards you and they're going to act faster than the AI. You just have to pick the right pass then.
Yeah, that's a good point, 𝗪𝗪s. The tapping of R1 is definitely something I do. If you're not too used to that, I think it was 𝗏𝗏𝗏 on the podcast said before about using slow build up can help because your players are just going to move a bit slower in your own third, and actually conversely that can kind of help because they don't just bomb forward and become more difficult to pass to. And if you use, say, forward runs for chance creation, you can kind of compensate for that, which is quite good. I would say as well, hug sidelines is so helpful. That's been quite obvious. If you have your players sitting on the sideline, you can, if you have long pass, just switch the ball to them. And also it opens up more space in the center, so you're not so immediately pressed. So even if you're not necessarily playing that false nine tactic specifically, for example, you'll often find if you're playing a tactic with 2 wide players, a fullback and another wide player, that can be really helpful for getting yourself out of pressure. So yeah, I think that's probably enough for now on pressing. So we'll come back with another question right after this break. Hello, listeners. A quick reminder that this podcast is made possible through the generosity of supporters out there. And actually, they aren't just doing it out of the kindness of their heart, because you get a whole extra podcast every single week as a supporter. And you can sign up for a 7-day free trial right now over on Patreon. And after that, it's just £3 a month to continue supporting. It makes a huge difference. The podcast for a time wasn't able to be weekly because I had other work commitments, but this has made it possible to deliver a podcast every single week, and in fact, an extra one too, just for supporters, as I mentioned. So if that interests you and you want that extra content, and actually if you would like even more, there's the supporter Discord at the gold tier, there is the Hall of Fame at the end of the podcast in the icon tier. There are loads of perks available, so why not check it out if you haven't done so already by searching Support for Weekly or following the link in the description of this podcast. If you consider doing so, that would be hugely appreciated, and a big thank you to all those supporters, as I said, keeping the podcast going and keeping Foot Weekly weekly. Right, let's get back into the pod. Hello, welcome back after the break. Right, we have this question, which is an interesting one from Soviet Neil. He says, any tips on playing what I'd describe as attritional players, those who lean hard into the broken mechanics and RNG elements of the game? I hold my own against anyone who wants to play football, even the better players, but I really struggle against the win at all costs crowd. Always have, but especially since FIFA 22. Japes, any kind of commentary on that? I mean, how do you handle players that are really kind of sweating hard, I suppose, and you're getting good results, so I guess you must be playing and beating them then, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes it requires like outrageous levels of focus, because you have to, every time that they get the ball, you're going to manually have to think to yourself, okay, which, like, you know exactly what's going to happen, so you're constantly, you have to make sure your team is like keeping shape, and you have to, like, it's exhausting. Like, I get it. There are games or matches that I get in Elite where I know if a player is going to play like that within the first 5 minutes, and it's just not going to be a very fun game, like, I'll just quit out. Like, I don't care. Yeah. It's just gonna, like, I'm playing this game because I think it's fun. Weekend League is maybe different at times, because I'm going in and I'm expecting it more. I'm also probably playing somewhat, not necessarily everybody that's trying to do the mechanic abuse that's playing at like an elite level. So they're going to make mistakes, and I will be able to take advantage of it. But when it's a truly excellent player that's looking to do that, like, it's just not going to be super fun. It's just, you either have to look at it as like, I have to figure out how to grind out this victory, or just be like, I'm not going to waste 15-20 minutes playing this. I'm going to just skip this and go on.
Do you find it's worse during team of the season, would you say, and those kinds of times of year?
Yeah, maybe. I think I do. Yeah, probably. I think there's a certain section of the player base that comes back when the Reds are good, we could say. Obviously, I'm not talking about Man United, but
they could be waiting a while.
Yes, just when the rewards are good, they come back and they decide, like, all of a sudden they want to play and get the rewards that then they're gonna leave the game and not use anyway. So, like, I don't really understand the logic of it there. But they're reward hunters, and you're gonna play more 4-3-2-1. You're gonna play against like the players trying to do the same type of thing, and that's fine. Like, they're totally entitled to play that way. I don't hold any resentment. I just know that it's not the way I want to play, and it's not that fun. And like, losing, even if I were to quit out of like 2 games and drop from down a rank in Weekend League or whatever, like, in the grand scheme of things, my rewards aren't going to be that different. Like, I just don't. Like, if it's bothering you that much, or you can say, I'm going to play like a rat tactic, but not like a rat. You could try to like match it. I think for me, the other thing that I've done is I develop a tactic that I think is like really, really fun regardless, and gives me a chance to grind out those games and win, which is like the 4-5-1. And I think it matches up pretty well against some of those folks. So, you can work on honing a tactic that you think is fun regardless. Or when you get into those matches, start like bring in a tactic that you've been like toying with as like situational for this type of thing, and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, tweak it for the next time. and just treat it like a challenge that way.
Yeah, interesting. So, Hugh, what's your approach to this? Is it similar to what 𝗲𝘱s has been saying?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I think on one hand, if people are playing in the way that is most effective for getting wins and you don't want to play that way, then it's hard to get that mad if they're winning and you're not, if they are doing the things that help them win more than you are doing. But on the other hand, I totally sympathize that it's incredibly tedious and frustrating to play people who play in these certain ways when you can't do anything about it. I think for me, the best compromise is to find a tactic that I feel like counters what they're doing the best. So it gives me the best chance of winning without being forced to play the way that they play to win. I'm sure if I wanted to play the meta 4-3-2-1, I could do that and go 20-0 in weekend league, but I don't get enjoyment out of that. I get more enjoyment out of winning 16 or 18 or maybe sometimes 19 or 20 games playing false 9 or 3-4-2-1 or things like that. And obviously everybody's personal goals will change in terms of what you're willing to hit. But I think that if you're changing to a tactic that you're playing because you find it fun, then the enjoyment has to come from playing in the fun tactic, not necessarily just from winning. But I do try to do both, and sometimes it is incredibly frustrating. So it's just trying to find that balance between fun and competitive, winning in your own way rather than having to play the way everyone else does.
Yeah, I would also add, he was asking for tips, and I think the point about finding a tactic that does counter the meta is a really good thing to suggest. I would also say it sounds so simple and maybe a bit get good, but you can get really good results playing football within FC, if that makes sense. So as you improve and your ability to
get
play
good
in a non-meta way improves, you will beat more of those players, right? You just will. I'm not beating as many of these attritional players as either of you two are because I try to play FC as football and I'm at a disadvantage because of that, but I'm not quite as good at playing at FC like football as perhaps either of you two, so I wouldn't beat as many players. So if you improve at that particular thing, then you will obviously get better results against those attritional players. So I guess that's simple but maybe helpful advice for people. This did lead to...
everybody needs to be told to get good at times.
And also get good is harsh, right? It's just get even better, right? Let's assume everyone listening is already good because they are. Most players who'd be listening to this are already very good at the game, even if maybe they don't necessarily think that they would be. The only thing I would also add is that defensively, I never consider it not playing football if you defend it in a way that is countering the meta, right? And I think it's because I find defending kind of boring anyway, so I'm not too bothered about, reading the meta plays, let's say, that people are going to do and defending those. And that is probably something that you have to just kind of adjust to over the course of a cycle as you see them and as you learn to defend them. Interesting question that came out of this. 𝗪𝘀𝘀 mentioned here, it's the tackles that I struggle with. I'm a good left stick dribbler, also I think, but the constant spam of tackles, even from behind, means they still seem to get the ball. Sometimes I think you can't really stop being tackled in games. And there was also a point made that tackle spam is extremely frustrating. I'd be interested to know, actually, let's go with you, Hugh. Do you find that you struggle to play against people who spam tackles? And I guess, is there a particular way that you should approach games like that?
I do sometimes. I think it can be frustrating when someone misses a tackle and then can immediately just go and make another attempt. It feels like there's no real punishment for that. I think that you kind of have to be patient in your dribbling. I do a lot of left stick dribbling, so I'll kind of left stick dribble around the defender, wait for them to dive in, and then sprint and accelerate away from them so that even if there's not a big penalty, they at least have a little delay before they can sprint to catch up. So that's what I try to do, but it can definitely be difficult when, like I said, when someone can just keep attempting tackles that you feel like even if you beat them once, that you might have to wait for them to go again before you can even do anything.
Yeah, I feel like there does come a point at a certain level where you tend not to see that because it is something that gets taken advantage of.
I'm not even quite sure what tackle spam is that way, so I don't know.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that it is something that you don't see.
I just feel like if people do that, you're gonna get scored on a lot.
Yeah. I find, technical dribbling, I don't know what things you use when someone dives in, 𝗲𝘱s, but I find technical, holding the R1 to go past a player really helpful for that.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. I Oh, there are a lot of tactics, I suppose. As soon as people do that, they create so much space because the player's committed. And if you're mistiming tackles, like that is like the easiest way to get scored on.
And it's interesting because Gary was saying, I'm a good left stick dribbler, but I think it's not actually dribbling that you want in order to beat people who are spamming tackles, right? Yes, you'll need to like shift the ball maybe, but often it's maybe like a ball roll, or it's technical dribble, or it's something that gives you a bit more, what's the word, a kind of distance or a short acceleration boost that is going to get you away from people spamming tackles rather than necessarily, left stick dribbling, for example. Like I really like the heel to ball roll where you hold L1 and go up down. And also the regular heel to heel is actually still pretty good. So that's just up down. That's if you're traveling sort of up the screen. So those things I think are probably what you want, where you're going to get a little bit more of a boost. I'd also say that if someone's prone to tackling, then they're probably prone to trying to manually block with a tackle. And actually, if you do a dummy shot or you cancel your shot, then you're probably going to be able to then shift the ball and take a shot on goal, which won't be blocked. So that can be quite helpful. James actually mentioned the power shot fake, right, last week, which would also be useful in that situation. I think that's probably that question done, although there may well be more questions. I realize we haven't done it in that much depth, but we'd be interested to know what people would want to know about that. Hugh, any kind of final tips or anything gameplay related you think might be useful?
I'd say just be patient in general, especially now with all these high-rated players, that if you try to play too fast, which can be easy to do because you think, I've got max pace, max passing, max dribbling, whatever, that like you can just fall into the trap of rushing things a lot.
Yeah, I'm guilty of it.
That's how you get countered. So especially if you're facing someone who you feel like I should definitely be beating this person, and you're like, I'm just going to like do a ping pass into my striker and turn and bang a finesse from 25 yards. And like you might be capable of doing that, but trying to do those things is how you then like do a bad pass and get countered. And now you're losing to someone who you shouldn't be losing to. So just be patient. The goals will come. You don't have to speed run to force a rage quit. If you can get 1 or 2 goals, force them to be more aggressive, then you can hit them on the counter, and then they're probably going to quit anyway. So don't try to rush through games and think that because you have great players that you can just do whatever you want, because they also have great players who can defend those things that you're trying to do.
Yeah, actually, before we go, I did want to mention a play style that I think is quite underrated. Pinged pass, definitely very useful, as I mentioned. But also,
be careful, just real quick.
Yeah.
Be careful with ping pass, because the talking about playing fast thing, because your base passes speed up, I find that the more players that I put in my team with ping pass, the faster I play. Now, that is both a good thing and a bad thing. It allows me to take advantage of mistakes my opponents make, but it also gets me into the situation where I play way too fast, like with what who's talking about. So just be aware of the double-sided coin to ping pass or whatever.
With great passing power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Don't try to use pinged passes as a through ball. Like if someone's running into space, play it in front of them. But like some people just try to just spam a ping pass and then it goes behind the player and someone just intercepts it. I like to do it to someone who's like, maybe there's a defender kind of near them, but 2-3 yards behind. You can ping it into their feet, and pinged pass plus makes it easier for them to trap that. It's like kind of getting it into them before they can get closed down, rather than like playing it into a runner in space, because I feel like that's often how you get those cut out, because you're trying to play too fast. You're like, well, pinged pass goes faster than a through ball, so I'm just going to ping it into them. And it's like not really what you want to do.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible thing. What I was going to say actually though is I've been using more 𝘵𝘃𝗃 plus, and Japes, I know you're a big fan from the earlier cycle. And the player I weirdly was using for chemistry reasons was 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 𝗟𝗶, the left back. And I found, playing passes inside with someone with 𝘵𝘃𝗃, as well as incisive, but 𝘵𝘃𝗃 particularly is really, really good. You can get some really nice combos. I don't know whether it's true, but it feels like they make moves faster in order to get into a position to receive the ball again. It is still a problem, because sometimes if you play sort of a bit of 𝘵𝘃𝗃, the player doesn't really catch up with the play, which is a bit annoying. But I have found, at least maybe something to do with Jordi Alba's positioning or where he's playing, he often will be there again to receive the pass out wide, which is really nice. So yeah, tiki-taka, even in wide areas, I think is actually really good. So yeah, a final thing to look out for that. Great. Well, I think that does wrap us up for this week's gameplay podcast. We can say our goodbyes to the guests here. So yeah, Japes, thank you very much for joining us on this gameplay pod.
Thank you much, Ben. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, and thank you very much as well to Hugh. Good to have you on.
Yep, thanks for having me. It was a good time as always.
Yeah, it's been good. And of course, if you want extra podcast content, then you could become a supporter. Just search Support for Weekly. There's a free trial and it is very quick and easy to sign up. An extra podcast every single week. And of course, you can get these podcasts, the main feed ones, into your podcast feed directly via all the different podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. If you are a supporter, then a huge thank you for keeping the pod going, and a big thank you to those icon patrons: Dave B, Hugh J, Darren W, Alistair M, Don P, Rob P, Jeff B, Damon H, Tom B, Adam G, Neil P, Alex M, Jake S, Dan W, Roger D, Lee A, Andrew C, Nishant, Waterman, Dylan H, Adam R, Rob L, Brendan W, Michael K, David G, Jimmy K, Cherry Drank, John D, Michael B, Aditya S, and Joshua K. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. Ultimate Team is a bit like life really. It has its many ups and downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.